Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it. Hello. As Matt mentioned, I'm Brandon, and thank you all so much for being here. I will spare everyone my singing voice, but I am here to present the book that I'm in the process of writing. And that book is Seven Provisional Truths: How We Come to Know Things and Why It Matters. So first, I'll go over my motivations for writing the book, and then I'll go over my writing approach, and then we'll kind of get into the meat of things. So, kind of my motivation for writing the book is we're in the background of a socio-political crisis right now. Namely, we live in an era of widespread misinformation, conspiracism, and bullshit in public discourse. These are symptoms of a larger epistemological crisis that's been unfolding within the West, with disastrous consequences for the civil society that sustains our democratic institutions. So basically, beyond just having different interpretations over basic facts that we can more or less agree upon, different segments of society have been increasingly living within incommensurable realities. And as I'm sure we all know, this makes it extraordinarily difficult to reach a foundational consensus for productive disagreements. So the task ahead, while it's a hard truth that we're only able to control our own attitudes and beliefs, and not the attitudes and beliefs of other people, what is very much within our grasp is how we orient ourselves to the world around us. Fortunately for us, more productive and mindful ways of engaging with the world and with other people can be cultivated. And doing so involves taking on far more responsibility for the attitudes and beliefs that guide our behavior. So basically, kind of the crux of things is a more sophisticated understanding of how our minds work and how knowledge is constructed is key for developing a healthier relationship to the attitudes, narratives, and beliefs that orient us to the world. So I thought I might explain my aims and methodologies up front because I realize not everybody speaks jargon from philosophy as a second language. So the methodological framework that we'll be using for this exploration has its basis in three things: epistemology, phenomenology, and embodied cognition. Epistemology is a domain of philosophy that deals with theories of knowledge, and in particular, what constitutes valid knowledge. Or kind of another way of saying that is how we know what we think we know. Next up is phenomenology, which is also a domain of philosophy. And this one concerns itself with how things are disclosed to us in the immediately of our direct lived experience. And finally, we have embodied cognition. Embodied cognition is a multidisciplinary paradigm which emphasizes how our bodily interactions with the world are central to how our minds work. So the title of the book is The Seven Provisional Truths, which are the central framing device for the ideas we'll be exploring. The phrase itself is a playful nod to Buddhism's Four Noble Truths, which we see on the left, let that shit go. It's also a recognition that these truths are necessarily partial. So basically, none of these are meant to be the final word on the subject matter they're commenting on. Instead, the whole point is they're meant to exist in dialogue with other perspectives. So just briefly, the seven provisional truths are, number one, minds disclose worlds. Number two, knowledge is mostly situated coping. Number three, categories are always contextual. Number four, all perspectives are partial. Number five, intellect serves intuition. Number six, motivated reasoning is the norm. And number seven, beliefs serve us best when they're held lightly. For this presentation, we'll be focusing on just the first of these seven truths and go into that in more depth instead of trying to torpedo rush our way through all seven. So next up, I will be talking about my approach to writing philosophy, which is writing complex ideas in a way that people can actually fucking understand. So our boy on the left here is Immanuel Kant, might have heard of him. He's a very important thinker within philosophy, and he is also the archetype of a truly terrible writer. Um, point here is that academic philosophy is written for masochists, in my humble opinion, as someone who's read a lot of it. So academic philosophy can be a chore and a bore to get through. And this is because it tends to be written for other professional academics with close to zero shits given for non-specialists. And the tragedy here is that academic philosophy is positively brimming with insightful, even profound ideas that are poorly communicated. And indeed, reading many of the great works within the philosophical tradition can feel a bit like learning a second language, which is not a credit to their authors. On the other side of the coin, you have pop philosophy. So many of us have been 14-year-old boys who've been interested about the world. So we have this 14-year-old boy here, might have been me. On the left, he's misunderstanding Stoicism. On the right, he's misunderstanding absurdism. So basically, the problem with pop philosophy is that it lacks depth. So it can be a great way to spark initial interest in philosophy, but by virtue of its own goals and designs, it does tend to lack depth. Additionally, on top of that, it tends to lack breadth as well. And this is due to a somewhat narrow focus on a handful of big-ticket concepts and practitioners. At its worst, surface-level explorations of philosophical ideas can leave us more, rather than less, ignorant. And this is especially likely when the background assumptions behind a concept aren't acknowledged or explored. So next up, will somebody fix that damn trolley? So I'll assume everyone has just a very basic passing familiarity with the trolley problem. It's all over pop media. It's in one of my favorite shows, The Good Place. But the famous trolley problem is a good case study for some of these problems. So basically, the purpose of the thought experiment is to shed light on our ethical intuitions. So basically, you have a lever, and you divert the trolley onto one of two tracks. And then the complication is you push an extremely fat man onto the tracks. And the idea is, why does shoving the fat guy into the tracks feel like murder when just like pulling a mechanical lever doesn't? And while the thought experiment is an engaging way of sparking somebody's initial interest in ethics, it can also be potentially very misleading. So basically, buried within the trolley problem is an unacknowledged assumption that ethics is primarily a form of detached intellectual reasoning. And this can lead us to overlook the possibility that ethics can also be an emotionally grounded skill that can be cultivated through practice. So next up, right on the use of metaphor and jargon. And this Charlie Kelly on the left here kind of is a summation of some of my experience trying to read through some of these great works of philosophy, because they don't explain their jargon. They just assume you speak their bullshit as a second language. So to make my work more approachable, I employed a few different strategies. One of these is to organize each of those seven truths around an orienting metaphor that ties it to a relatable everyday context. And to give credit to where it's due, this is an idea I was inspired by from Jonathan Haidt, who used it within his social psychology work. And also, since complex terminology can be a barrier of entry for newcomers, at the front of the book, I've also included a glossary of philosophical jargon that's meant to be an on-ramp for readers who aren't already versed in philosophical discourse. And then the framing device for the whole book is that it's a metaphorical guided tour through a 7-story building, which each of the provisional truths occupying one of its floors. And the executive suite on the top floor represents a more cognitively flexible relationship with whatever it is that orients us within reality, be that a religion, a scientific paradigm, a political ideology, or good old-fashioned common sense. All right, so the rest of the presentation will be diving into the foundation for the work, the first provisional truth, which is that minds disclose worlds. And the orienting metaphor for this one is that world disclosure is our mind's way of constructing a home for us within reality. So if this investigation is likened to a guided tour of a 7-story building, then world disclosure is its structural foundation. So the first provisional truth is that a central part of what minds do for us is to create homes for us within reality. And just like a house is constructed to be compatible with the lifestyle of human beings, for instance, houses aren't built underwater, they're not built in the sky, and their doorways aren't accessed from the ceiling. So minds construct an experiential reality for us to live within that comes pre-arranged in terms of our needs and capacities. So the process by which minds turn reality into a home for us to reside within is called world disclosure. So what is a world? A world refers to a cumulative whole of meaningful boundaries, patterns, and relationships for a living being. So basically, we can think of a world as what reality is on an experiential level for an individual. To disclose means to reveal or uncover something. So world disclosure is the process of revealing a meaningful world within the whole of reality. So as living beings whose survival hinges on our ability to interpret and respond to what we come across in the world, we do not and we could not reside within a bare reality. What we actually reside within in our lived experience is a meaningful world. So continuing on with the metaphor, houses, of course, they don't build themselves, even though I heard there is a 3D printed house within Detroit, but normally they don't build themselves. Rather, they're constructed from building materials that are put together through the labor of people. Likewise, minds disclose worlds from the opportunities and demands of a particular environment or set of environments, and they do so through the structural organization that's provided by a living body with survival needs. So the crux of it is that it's only through our living bodies that our minds have access to a world of people, places, and things. So worlds can also be thought of as what environments become through minds which are hardwired to experience meaning. And the difference between an environment and a world can be likened to the difference between a house and a home. So basically, a home isn't just a physical space, but it's also a significant place that has been suffused with a rich tapestry of familiarity and meaning. And an additional nuance here is that the direction isn't, it's not a one-way thing. It's bi-directional. So our worlds help make sense of the material universe, or however you describe the universe in your metaphysics, and the universe helps describe our world. So some aspects of our biological physiology which have been especially significant for the types of world disclosure that human beings experience include highly expressive and communicative faces. And basically, this is why you can see two apples and a banana on a table and read that as a face. That's how reality is disclosed to us. In addition to that, we also have a bipedal posture that's oriented along a front-back axis. We also have highly dexterous hands, and these are our main means of manipulating our surroundings. And additionally, most human beings use forward-facing eyesight to serve as our primary navigational sense. So the structural aspects of our physiology are important because they play a leading role in the types of affordances that our worlds contain. So thought of as an invitation to interact with something in a particular way. For example, a chair, like in the image, offers affordances for sitting. A hammer offers affordances for hammering. A PlayStation offers affordances for playing a video game. What's important about affordances is they aren't something that we're consciously aware of most of the time. Instead, they basically play a role in how objects show up for us in our lived experience. In other words, it's simply obvious to us that chairs are for sitting and that hammers are for hammering without having to think about it. So this isn't to imply that objects invite us to interact with them in only one way. So a tool such as an axe can be used to split firewood, but it can also be used to cave in somebody's skull, as we see on the left here. So basically, the particulars of what any given affordance will be aimed at will largely depend on what the demands of the situation is that you're absorbed in. Basically, their main purpose is to help our minds navigate the complexity of reality. And they do this by highlighting which aspects of our environment are relevant for us within a given situation. What's cool about affordances is that precisely because they are so flexible, our lived experiential worlds that are structured in terms of affordances are ripe for improvisation. So next up, we'll be taking a look into object perception and using that as a window into how our minds work. And reason for looking into this is because object perception is just so foundational for what reality is for us on an experiential level. So understanding this process can highlight the extent to which our minds actively shaped our lived experience of reality. So basically, everyday perception is grounded in a tacit assumption that objects, material objects like this candle, your seat, the room we're in, basically the tacit assumption is that these objects in our sensory field exist absolutely, that they're fixed features of a mind-independent reality that's out there. So let's call this the objective view of objects, since it's grounded in a view of tacit objectivity. So the problem with the objective view isn't that it's wrong. It's not wrong. A better way of framing it is that it's just highly partial. So the objective everyday view does point to some very important truths, as we see with our image on the left here. So basically, what it points to is that material objects do have a realness to them, which extends beyond the immediacy of our direct observations. So human beings, we discover this as we get a little bit older and we gain object permanency. So an infant who sees a ball roll behind a couch will think that the ball disappeared from existence. Once we get a little bit older, it's normal for us to realize that the ball still exists, even if it's not in our perceptual field. The additional partial important truth that the objective view points to is that our individual perspective is not the center of reality. So basically, while the day-to-day view is certainly good enough for navigating our regular go-about lives, what's a more complex and more fascinating truth awaits us if we're willing to temporarily set aside our everyday common sense assumptions. So the view that I'm exploring in this book is that objects are mentally constructed, and I call this a disclosive view. And it's just as that objects are mentally constructed, importantly though, but not imaginary. So what a mental construct refers to is a distinction that our minds create and sustain, which is coupled to some observation about ourselves or our world. So basically, rather than being pre-existing features of a mind-independent reality, the gist of this view is that material objects in our perceptual field are the end products of a cognitive process. So basically, they're how our minds carve up an undifferentiated reality into discrete chunks that can be related to in a concrete way, such as a house, as a chair, as an apple, as a PlayStation. So an important bit of nuance here is that mental constructs are not necessarily imaginary. So as living beings whose minds are adapted for survival, objects would be useless to us if they didn't generally distill reliable information that's attuned to our perspective within a shared reality. And this is how we're able to draw a meaningful distinction between objects in our perceptual field and hallucinations. And this is despite the fact that both are mentally constructed. And although hallucinations may echo aspects of the real world, our world, their inherently erratic nature renders them too inconsistent and unstable to serve as reliable conduits to this shared reality. So thus, objects are mentally constructed, but not imaginary. So onwards to ontology. So ontology was a big focus of Duncan's wonderful presentation. I want to dive into it a little bit more. So in addition to being an epistemology, world disclosure is also an ontology. Okay, what is an ontology? Ontology is a domain within philosophy that grapples with questions about the nature of existence. Its main area of focus is on what things ultimately are. So being, what is it good for? Essentially, ontology investigates the being of entities, small b being, and the nature of capital B being itself. So when we say that something is a particular type of thing, we're referring to its being. So in essence, it's our most basic and primordial way of understanding people, places, and things as people, places, and things. So at first glance, this might seem like philosophical bullshit, in essence. So it might seem like a rather straightforward and unproblematic notion. Obviously, you don't have to study philosophy to know what a house is. But what's interesting here is that when we dig a bit deeper, what we find is, in fact, there are several ways that being has been interpreted within philosophy. And what's important is that these differences actually matter, since they're foundational to our intuitions about what is ultimately real. So just kind of a very quick overview of some traditional perspectives on being in the West. So these traditional perspectives frame being in terms of fixed metaphysical properties that objects contain. So our boy Plato, his ontology revolved around a transcendent realm of forms, i.e. ideas, which was said to be the true reality behind the objects we interact with, and that would be an idealist framework. His student Aristotle suggested in his empiricism that objects are composed of 4 fundamental elements: earth, water, air, and fire, which is also where pop culture things today, like Avatar: The Last Airbender, kind of get their ontology. Rene Descartes proposed a form of ontological dualism, where everything in reality is composed of either matter stuff or mind stuff. And then our boy, Immanuel Kant, the terrible writer, suggested that because we always have access to objects from behind a layer of perception, we can never have access to the true reality behind appearances. And this is known as transcendental idealism. And basically, kind of the emphasis here is that despite their differences, these share a core similarity. And what these viewpoints have in common is that they are substance ontologies, where capital B, being, is equated to what things are made of. In contrast, world disclosure is grounded in the realization that being isn't a physical property. Instead, it's a form of understanding for a particular someone or something. Basically, it's how trees and cats and people are first disclosed to us as distinct entities, whereby they can become meaningful for us. So what's important here for the study of philosophy and just for our thoughts about the world is that all conceptual distinctions are derived from an understanding of being, and a lot of this understanding is pre-conceptual. So how is understanding of being essential for daily life? Well, because it's pre-conceptual, consider just how many different types of things we're able to attend to in our day-to-day lives without any real thought or effort. So using doorknobs and chairs and eating utensils is normally so effortless that our interactions with these items are essentially automatic. Or let's put ourselves in another situation. We were at a lovely dinner last night, and when we were serving the contents of an unfamiliar dining room table, the question of which items are food and which aren't is normally so immediately obvious to us that the question never even occurs. Which brings us to the care that binds. So the final big piece of the puzzle for world disclosure is our capacity for care. And what care refers to is our concernful absorption within a world whose outcomes matter to us. And this is foundational to how we experience reality. So basically, our ability to derive meaning from what we encounter within the world is rooted in care. As living beings, we're thrust into a world that we didn't choose or create. Nonetheless, though, this world is highly impactful for us. So basically, we have skin in the game for how we interact with the world. Reality has consequences for us, and those consequences are embodied in the very structure of care. So basic genealogy of care. So capacity for care isn't something that we consciously choose, and it's not just an airy-fairy feeling that we choose to dip in and out of. Instead, it's structural. It's an outcome of our organizational structure as living beings. 4 minds that grow out of living system, so basically the types of minds that we have, interconnections between a body and a mind, or between a body, mind, and its environment, is what allows our interactions with reality to be consequential for us. This is an outcome of the fact that our mind's existence is sustained by the ongoing maintenance of our living bodies and vice versa. So if our living bodies fail, our minds fail. Likewise, if our minds fail, our bodies will soon follow unless artificially kept alive through external mechanisms. The important part here is that adequate access to food, safety, companionship, opportunities for self-actualization, these aren't abstractions we can relate to in a disengaged way. When we're deprived of what we need from reality, we end up suffering in real ways. So where does this lead from here? So the rest of the book is building towards reconstructive epistemology. So what is that? Well, a genuinely reconstructive epistemology, it recognizes that our realities, while they are constructed, they're grounded in shared experiences that have a real, tangible effect on our lives. By understanding that our knowledge of the world is rooted in care, our concernful absorption within a consequential reality, we can learn to hold our beliefs in a more provisional way while still acknowledging their significance. And while this approach is just one small facet of how we might reconcile our epistemological differences, what it does offer is a path for more productive engagement with the narratives and beliefs that we use to make sense of the world. So as individuals, we may not have the power to change the world, but what we can do is orient ourselves to it in a more flexible and compassionate way. Yep, and thank you for listening. This presentation will go up online along with the first 2 chapters of my book. They're available for free at 7provisionaltruths.org. How are we doing on time? Okay, I would be happy to take any questions if anyone has some. Yeah.
I have only 2 problems I'd like to ask. One, well, they're related. Well, one is, it seems just wrong to me to say that a PlayStation is actually an undifferentiated, it's not really there. It's a thing that I am mentally constructing out of undifferentiated reality when thousands of people very carefully constructed this thing and designed it, and I don't understand.
That is a fair point. What I was emphasizing was our day-to-day, direct, pre-reflective engagement with the world. So when we look at like a PlayStation, it's an aspect of reality. It's real, but it's also an interpretation we have about our embodied experience. It's basically a way of chunking, relating to what we're experiencing within reality in a concrete, actionable way. Does that make sense?
I think I can understand you're saying we are interested in what it means for us, what it signifies to us. But I feel like you're extending that to say it's not real. You have yourself imagined that these things all go together.
So mine, I didn't quite get into this in as much depth as I would have wanted to in the presentation, but my perspective is that these things are real, but using a slightly different definition of what real means. What I'm rejecting is the idea that things are transcendentally real. What I'm saying is that the things we experience, like the PlayStation, they're interactionally real. They are relational. They're an interaction between our minds and the reality we're in.
Okay, I would, as an empiricist, I never even considered the possibility of that.
Oh, fair enough. And I also want to emphasize that I'm not treating this as the only valid perspective. I was writing this with the intention that it be in dialogue with other perspectives. I'm just one dude. I have a perspective within reality. I have certain expertise, and you have certain expertise. So I welcome other perspectives and criticism, obviously. Yes, ma'am.
My question was going to be very similar to that one because I wanted to know how this relates to the way that we make things an object by giving them their objectness. So, for example, do you mean that it's similar to the experiment where they ask people, if you take this box of thumbtacks and a candle and a match, and you actually have to make a shelf, like, can you put this candle on the wall? Somebody figures out that they could put a thumbtack through the box, and it loses its boxness and it gains shelfness. And they put the candle on it, and they light it.
Yeah, I love that example. So basically what I'm hinting at is that our perspective on realness, we'd be better off if we treat it in a more flexible way. So on the one hand, what I'm challenging is a very rigid perspective on realness, but at the same time, you can this pendulum can swing too far to the other direction, where you say just because things are mentally constructed and they're not transcendentally real, that automatically means they're imaginary. So I do think it's possible that there are better and worse mental constructs that are more or less appropriate for a certain situation. So if we think of something like a chair isn't just a material object, it's functional. What can serve as a chair depends on the demands of the situation. There are some contexts where just sitting on a log that serves as a chair, but you wouldn't, in a fancy dinner party, that wouldn't adequately be a chair. So it's a functional, pragmatic perspective that I am representing. Yes?
Can you go back? You mentioned something about care before actually.
Oh, sure.
Before we get to this question, I want to see if I can remember it.
Okay.
It's like care refers to our. I guess Stephen. Oh, I guess never mind. My question feels valid.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so let me just emphasize that care isn't like an airy-fairy feeling, like I care about this shirt, I think it's cool. It's more fundamental and embodied than that. So basically, it arises from the fact that we're living beings with survival needs, and reality has consequences for us. If we don't get what we need from reality, we suffer in real ways, and that's not something we can step out of. Yes?
I think that what this is describing is what in common speech we would call uncaring, because it's completely selfish. And the other person doesn't even exist in this. We're talking only about what we need to survive. We care because we have skin in the game. And that's not actually what people mean when they say caring. They mean seeing other people as existing, as real.
That is a fair point. And I recognize that I'm using the word care in a slightly different way from how it's used in common day-to-day speech. So basically when you do that within philosophy, that's called a neologism, and that's basically a way of using a word that's not common within day-to-day speech. So this is a little bit more technical version of the word care that comes from the philosopher Martin Heidegger. If there were another word available, I might have used that, but I'm going with care. Yes?
How about the word stakes?
Oh, stakes, okay. Okay, I think that's a fair point. I'm ready to concede fair points. Yeah.
I'm going to follow up on Heidegger and caring, because Heidegger was a committed Nazi.
Yes, I don't.
War, and my big problem with phenomenology in general is it doesn't seem to provide any reason not to be a Nazi.
I would absolutely level that criticism against Heidegger. It's completely valid. What I would counter that with, while recognizing that your point is valid, this isn't necessarily a moral philosophy, is that phenomenology doesn't just belong to Heidegger. There's been a century of other people developing these ideas afterwards. So you have people like Maurice Merleau-Ponty, and more contemporary people like, Hubert Dreyfus, who I'm not wedded to Heidegger. I accept some of his ideas, and I reject other of his ideas. And he absolutely does deserve the criticism he gets for his political views. I do not dispute that. I encourage it.
What I'm asking is, can you, adopting this epistemology, end up with an ethical system which says I shouldn't be a Nazi? Because I feel like, what Sartre was doing, like his whole life, was trying to make a phenomenological epistemology say you shouldn't be a Nazi, and he failed.
He failed, yeah. I'm aware, and I'm not a big fan of Sartre myself and that brand of existentialism.
But can you tell us why not to be a Nazi while being faithful to your principles?
Okay, so I think Nazism and fascism, it's based upon a lack of reflectivity for why you hold the beliefs you do. And that's specifically because a lot of it is built in psychological projection and scapegoating that's not sustainable if you're able to put a larger space between stimulus and response. Mike, yes, Matt.
You mentioned ethics was a skill, and it's possible to be a philosopher and really good at that, and be really bad at the skill of ethics.
Yes. Point well taken, sir.
Unrelated.
Yep, because people don't necessarily practice what they preach. You can have somebody who is, well, we've all experienced this, like many of us have been to the doctor. The doctor perhaps isn't in the best shape, and he suggests that we adopt a healthy diet, and he's 100% right. But the thing is, just knowing what to do is not the same thing as being able to embody that in your day-to-day life. And I don't think that's particular to philosophy. That is a very human thing.
But I still think phenomenology is inconsistent with saying Nazism is bad. How can you justify saying Nazism is wrong with this epistemology?
Because you don't get ethics from epistemology.
But you can have an epistemology that does not. Yes, you do, because ethics are part of your ontology. I think you have. I guess because I'm a consequentialist.
But you can take another consequentialist like Mengele, who was like a diehard rationalist his entire life, and had like a very analytical, statistical model of why he believed certain people were, deserving of experimentation. So I don't think that there's.
Maybe he was a Nazi in the phenomenologist.
He wasn't a phenomenologist. That's what I mean.
I feel that the king has been waiting to speak for some time, so.
I mean, as someone who is pretty much like a hardcore phenomenologist, I would argue from the perspective of quite literally anything that can be theorized upon first passes through the realm of phenomena. So actually, as far as, there's a philosopher who kind of expounds on this, Emmanuel Levinas. Are you familiar with his work?
I haven't read.
So Levinas is quite fascinating because the way that he perceives first order, he's obsessed with the question of what is the first philosophy, and he arrives on the notion that phenomenological realities are prior to all types of philosophizing. In fact, one must have some type of encounter with the other in order to conceive of, in the first place, that philosophy is required, because what else would you use a philosophy for unless you confronted a subject-other divide in the first place? And the first thing that arises from that phenomenological quality of what is the other is precisely ethics, which is in what way do I treat the other upon not being able to access their own internal phenomenological reality. So here you have someone who is pretty much a hardcore phenomenologist who finds that it's indivorceable from ethics. Again, a lot of Nazi thinkers at the time didn't like Levinas because of this. But I think that the notion of phenomenology that you're using is particularly colored by Heidegger and Hegel, who have kind of taken phenomenology in a very particular direction. But like you mentioned, phenomenology is owned by a branch of philosophy, and there are just as many, there are many philosophers in the tradition evenos, we would take like phenomenology as actually the starting point of ethical principles and ethical reasoning. Because ethics as something that is just conceptual or just a series of rationalizations doesn't hold any weight. Actually, ethics is something that should emerge when a subject encounters some other, capital O other, using that as a technical term, if that's okay. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for those points.
Yeah.
I guess I would also contend that you do bring up some valid points, Phil. I would say that none of phenomenology isn't special in that regard. For instance, during World War II, you had Buddhists under Imperial Japan who were pursuing enlightenment, who were making excuses for the fascist Japanese government at the time. Additionally, you have modern people these days who claim to follow the teachings of Jesus, who are lobbying against giving poor people food and giving children free lunches in school. So what I'm saying is that phenomenology isn't special. It can be misused just like any other thought system. Yeah, Bruce.
Yeah, I don't know if this fits in, but Gödel, who looked at mathematics and truth, his theorem stated that in any system, that system cannot prove all of the things that are true.
Yeah, the inconsistency theorem.
Yeah, so therefore, there may be that a certain phenomenology can't prove or can't state that fascism is wrong, but it doesn't mean that because it can't, that fascism is right.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
I would place probably even a higher value than what I've been presenting is multi-perspectival viewpoint. So whatever anchors you to reality, you need to be open to other ways of looking at the world. And I'm not accepting phenomenology or my particular framework from this.
So you're not a Nazi?
I'm not a Nazi. You can put that on the record. Yes.
So I think this is something you're saying, but I want to clarify it.
Okay.
Right? So when we talk about the mind disclosing the world, the mind is embodied.
Yes.
Right? That means that the world that's disclosed to us is limited by how our brain works.
Well, not just our brain. The type of brain we have isn't separate and discrete from our body. Our brain is meant to be our brains are integrated with our bodies, but beyond just our brains, how our minds actually work is derived from the type of body we have. For instance, there's a famous essay within philosophy from Thomas Nagel called "What Is It Like to Be a Bat?" And basically, there's a disconnect in trying to put yourself into the shoes for something with a very different embodied structure. We don't have sonar like bats do, so we can't fully put ourselves into the shoes of something we don't have the wetware for, and our minds are structured differently because of that.
Like I've heard it said that because of the way our nervous system works, we only can make sense of the world by turning it into objects.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that the world, that objects, it's just like that's the only way we actually can think.
Yes, I completely agree with that. And what I didn't get into it, but what I argue for in the book, what I reject is transcendental objectivity, and what I argue for is human objectivity. So it's a type of pragmatic objectivity that not only acknowledges our human perspective within reality, but owns it and puts it center stage, so we're not making these frameworks without acknowledging that.
And then the ethics part is also same kind of embodied that, like, hey, there's certain things that just feel wrong because that's how it works in our bodies. It feels wrong to throw somebody on the tracks.
Yes.
It feels like murder, because we know what pain is like. We have bodies that experience pain. We see other people, and most of our ethical decisions are based on that and not philosophy and.
Oh, I 1000% agree. So I believe it's number 6 of my provisional truths. Intellect serves intuition. So typically what happens, and I'm kind of following a lot of Jonathan Haidt's work on this, but our intuitions about ethics and morality come first, and then typically our intellect is kind of like a lawyer that's trying to justify whatever our intuitions tell us. Now, that's not to say that we can't challenge our intuition, but just kind of our normal day-to-day lives, if we're not putting effort into it, intuitions come first. They're primary. Yes?
Yeah, I have a question about what is the difference between meaning and care? Like in the slide you said that, say that
Yeah.
we derive meaning from care. Is it possible to still have the capacity to care as a fundamental and not experience meaning in the world?
So I would say care is, the way I'm using care here is primary because it's related to our embodied structure. And meaning is how care is applied to a particular context. If we are interpreting something, it means it's relevant to us in some way, even if we're telling ourselves, hey, this doesn't matter for me. So our first intuition when we encounter something, we put it into 1 to 3 brackets typically, good, bad, or neutral. And that distinction is rooted in care. So meaning is basically how care gets put into contextual practice.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, if that's it, I will relinquish my time.